Hey everyone, thank you so much for signing up and joining my program on fundraising for startups. Today, what I'm going to walk you through is crafting the perfect pitch deck. Now, I've got a lot of experience with fundraising, both as a operator raising money myself for multiple different startups, as well as having been a mentor and continuing to be a mentor for places like the Launch Accelerator, the Halcyon Accelerator here in Washington, D.C. I've worked with companies that have gone through Techstars, Y Combinator, and then, of course, getting a ton of exposure to the members and their startups within Growth University. I've talked to and worked with hundreds and hundreds of founders and startups who have raised capital and have learned a lot of the lessons along the way on how to actually craft a deck, which really helps you think about how to most effectively present your vision to people that want to put in money. So we're going to get started. The overview that I want to walk you through quickly first is I'm going to give you a real pitch. So I'm actually going to show you the exact deck that I used when Growth University raised our angel round. We raised our round in March of 2021, and we raised just over $900,000. And the process was by far the fastest process that I've ever experienced on the capital raise side. And I think part of it was due to the market. Part of it was due to one of my partners who you'll see in the deck here. And part of it was that we really told a compelling story and pitched a long vision that included how we're going to grow this business and make it into a big company. Followed by that. So I'm just going to go through that as if I were pitching you. And it will be just a raw pitch that I have rehearsed a bunch of times, but I'm just going to give it to you as it comes out. That'll be about 5 minutes. Then I'm going to walk you through the essential elements of a pitch deck. So what are the things that you need to have? And how I'm going to present that to you is in context. So I'm going to go slide by slide, and I'm going to give you commentary and action items that you can take away with. So we're going to get started here. I'm actually gonna, when I do a pitch, I love to start my stopwatch. So I've got that here, and you're gonna see a little bit of how this works behind the scenes, but I'm gonna show you Growth University's Angel Pitch Round. Now, let's say that I'm either live in person. In this case, I actually did this over Zoom. Usually what you have is you have a starting point where the host, or if it's you being the host, when you're pitching an investor or a group of investors, you have control at this point, or somebody else has control. And then basically you start. So when I say I'm going to start, I'm going to actually click start on my phone, and I will give you an update on how long this took right after, but I will go uninterrupted as we go. So I'm going to start right now. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for showing up and tuning in today. I'm Craig Zingerlein. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Growth University, where founders build their playbook for growth. So every year, over 1 million startups are founded. Now, most fail, and some of us have been in that failure before. What we come to realize is that at each stage of a startup's life, they've got unique challenges that they're going to encounter. Now, in the early stage, their big challenges are typically finding initial customers. Founders typically overbuild their products, and they build their team ahead of demand. And there's a whole bunch of research and findings that have been put out there around overbuilding before you really have customer traction. At the growth stage, founders are often struggling to understand what metrics really matter to their business and how they can impact their metrics through customer acquisition and strong activation strategies and retention. And then at the scale stage, channels get saturated, acquisition costs typically go up, inefficiency kicks in, and this wastes a lot of time and money for the startups. Introducing Growth University, we provide founders the frameworks and strategies that they need to grow their startups and get to scale. We help increase the odds of success for the startups that we work with. Now, our areas of focus follow that linear path of the company stage. So in the early stage, we have programs around finding initial customers. We help you figure out how to do experimentation and to help you get in the mindset of failing fast or pivoting your model. At the growth stage, we help you build the foundations of growth. We help you look at running holistic growth modeling and develop those channel strategies that are going to get you to that next stage of scale. Where at scale, we're going to teach you how to learn the advanced growth skills that you're going to need to drive a broad-reaching customer acquisition model, effective activation, and then increased retention. So how do we do this? We actually deliver this through a series of live cohort programs, on-demand courses, and we work with subject matter deep dive expert guest speakers that come in. We provide material that keeps founders continuously learning as they go and build their startups. And we're going to focus on building a SaaS product to supplement this in 2022. So when we think about delivering our courses and programs, we look at, again, our calendar based on company stage and programs based on company stage. So what you'll see here is some of our early example of our courses that we've been running. Focus on early stage, you'll see that finding initial customers, early to growth stage, mastering growth. We've got programs that kind of fit each stage as well. And I'll talk a little bit about this later as we go, but programs on Facebook marketing, Google marketing, Instagram. We've got programs around activation and experimentation and product-led growth that are more meant for those growth and scale stage companies. So we basically have built this set of programs and curriculum to meet our founders where they are based on their stage of the journey. We're already live and running, and we've actually been trusted by founders at each and every stage. In fact, these 3 testimonials here are 3 different founders that have come through our membership community and have taken our courses and programs and have given us amazing quotes. Probably my favorite is Bethany's here. This isn't fluff material. The pace of the class was perfect enough to give us time to apply the actions in between each session. As a young company, you probably don't have a lot of resources to throw around, but this course is worthy of the investment. And of course, since then, we've gone on to build multiple courses. Bethany was one of our original adopters of the original program that we put out there. Now, we've got an annual membership model. Companies right now pay $1,500 per seat for a year of access to the programs. They can also pay $149 a month to get the same level of access. And in 2022, we'll provide a SaaS product that will give us additional subscription revenue. You can look at our forecast here. So we've built a detailed model. This is just a quick snapshot of it that shows us getting to roughly the $38,000 monthly recurring revenue forecast in December of 2021. And this is based on roughly 20-ish% month-over-month growth. Now, when we look at the market size and opportunity, our total addressable market, we've estimated to be about $5.4 billion. And this is based on the 1.3 million new tech startups that get created in the US annually. Now, our total addressable market could be bigger than that if we think about global, but we wanted to kind of cap it just looking at the US market right now. Our service addressable market is slightly smaller at $2 billion. And this is the spend that startups have that they're putting into marketing and growth as they hit product market fit. And then our service obtainable market, kind of what's more in front of us right now, $812 million is spent by startups that make it to that scale stage. And that's really what our focus is going to be right now. We have amazing traction, 188% average month-over-month growth between December and February. You can see both our MRR, monthly recurring revenue, and our active subscriber revenue counts, as well as the member counts, are going up and to the right. And we feel very strongly about the traction that we've built so far. Feedback has been phenomenal. How do we make this a large company? So our road to 100 million. We target a $6,000 annual spend per company, which is basically 4 seats per company. At 1,600 companies, we reach 10 million. At 16,000 companies, we reach 100 million. We believe we can get to the $100 million run rate in year 4 to 5 if we hit a $25,000 lifetime value per company. And that would include some of the revenue from our SaaS platform. But we are very aggressively growing this, and we are already seeing international growth. What you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen here are the cities and locations where folks are joining us from for some of our live cohorts. And you can see they're literally across the globe. Our team is phenomenal. Besides myself, I have my co-founder, Jason Calacanis, and my other co-founder, Jen Bryan. You probably know Jason as one of the world-renowned angel investors. And Jen Bryan is our CMO, head of growth and training. And she's a training executive, actually has her master's in marketing, and has trained hundreds and hundreds of companies on how to effectively build their marketing channel strategies. We've got amazing mentors, program hosts as well that are kind of embedded with our ecosystem and are also available to help those companies that come through. We're raising $500,000 to scale up right now. Most of that is already committed, actually, but that'll give us 18 months of runway while we look to our Series A. And the use of funds is going to be scaling up the team, scaling up our programs, and moving into product development. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. You can just reach out to me. I'm Craig at growthuniversity.io. Thanks. I'd love to answer any questions you might have. Okay, so that was my pitch, and it came in just about 7 minutes. So I've done it anywhere from 5.5 to 7.5 minutes. And when we did this live, I went a little bit faster. So I pulled it back a little bit. I was feeling kind of more in the groove today with this, but I wanted to walk you through what that looks like and what a fairly polished walkthrough that I can more or less time between that, call it 5.5 to 7.5 minutes. If I want to speed it up, I can get it down to 5. If I need to get it down to 3, I can pull a bunch of content out. But hopefully that gives you some context on how I went through my process when we were actually raising money. And then of course you open it up to Q&A. Now I'm going to walk you through the essential elements of a pitch. And I have found throughout the years fundraising that most great pitches have, give or take, 10 key elements that they focus on. They're outlined here. I've seen different iterations of people raise money off of shorter decks, off of longer decks. I know there's all sorts of examples out there on how Airbnb or Uber raised their first capital. Keep in mind that it's 2021 now. And so a lot of the examples that you're going to see from some of those companies that became unicorns, the whole fundraising process and methodologies has changed quite a bit and is different. So the 2021 version, the modern version is, I've found that these 10 key elements are generally present in all of the great pitches that I've seen that end up in successful fundraise. We're going to look at these side by side, and I'll provide commentary on a slide-by-slide basis using the deck that you've already seen. So this is the intro, right? So again, you may be in a situation where you're pitching live or you're pitching remotely. You have to have something here that gives your contact information and gives you a jumping off point. So you see my company logo, my company tagline, so where founders build their playbook for growth. You see who I am and what my title and role is. And kind of at the bottom right, you see my Twitter handle and my email address. So you want to provide that information in your template. For context, oftentimes investors, especially if you're pitching remotely or if you're pitching, let's say to a syndicate or you're in a group setting, somebody might have to hop off and they'll jot down your email. So you just want to make sure that on the communication side and on the brand side, this all aligns with kind of something that is viable and relevant to your audience. You should use the same logo you're using on your website. You should assume that whoever's going to potentially invest in you is also going to check out your website. So the first key step in building a really strong pitch is that you have to present a clear and large problem. You must solve a large problem in a large market. And it's incredibly hard to raise money if you don't come out of the gates strong with there being a real problem. And so I'll flip back between my slide and this in a second, but questions to ask yourself are, what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve for as your business? Why is it a problem? Who has this problem and how big is the problem, right? So I come out of the gates here and I say that every year over 1 million startups are founded and most fail. It's true. There are tons of startups that get created and there are lots of stats out there on why these companies fail. And when I started putting this deck together, it had come from a bunch of experience working with a lot of different companies. And I saw firsthand that by being an operator or being a co-founder or being involved as an advisor or maybe investing in companies at different stages, these challenges that these startups have are real. You, in fact, might be early stage and having a heck of a hard time finding initial customers. It's really hard. Or you might be at that scale stage. Maybe you just raised your Series A and you're finding that as you go from spending, say, $50,000 a month in Facebook and Instagram to $100,000, you're not really finding net new customers and your costs are skyrocketing. That's a scale stage problem. And you may be at the growth stage where I've spent a lot of time in these companies where some things are starting to work, but you're having a really hard time quantifying what actually is working and what's not working. So those metrics and understanding kind of what you should be measuring become really important. And I build this company stage arrow here to show that there is this linear progression from early stage to scale stage, right? So remember, what is the problem? Well, the problem is that most startups fail. Okay. Well, how is it a big market? Well, over 1 million startups are founded every year. That's just startups. That's not even counting other small businesses. Who has this problem? Every startup. I can make the case that every single startup has this problem, right? How big is the problem again? Most fail. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So when you have conversations with investors after, let's say they see this deck and they start asking you questions about the problem solution, there's been great research done by Startup Genome. I mean, Paul Graham has written about this. I've done a bunch of research here. CB Insights publishes a lot of stuff based on company failure. And the reason why I say stuff like founders overbuild products and team ahead of demand in the early stages is because that's what a lot of startups that fail in the early stage do. Before they have a lot of customers, they go and they continuously build their product without getting that market feedback. They're not actually monetizing perhaps, and they keep building the product. And then they go to try to do a big launch and they've overbuilt and it wasn't actually based on any real demand. So I could have an hour-long conversation with an investor about the challenges of early stage, growth stage, or scale stage, because that is the real set of problems that we've set out to solve with this company. And it really kind of scratches that personal itch I've had along the years of building startups. So that's the starting point. The next key element is around your solution. So introduce how you solve the problem. What is your solution? What does your solution provide now? What might it provide down the road? Right? So if you buy into maybe not overbuilding and kind of launching early, if you buy into that methodology, which I do, well, it means that you likely don't have your full solution baked right now. So you're going to want to show some aspiration about where you're going to go when you get to some level of scale. And so when I talk about this, I talk about providing founders with the frameworks and the strategies to grow their startups and to get to scale and to help them increase the odds of success. And then I talk about our areas of focus. So early growth and scale stage again, right? Remember, early growth, scale stage here on the problem, early growth, scale stage here on the solution side. And again, we show that linear progression based on company stage. Now, when I talk about solution, when we raised money in March, we were very early stage. We only had, I believe we had 4 programs total at that point. And so we're growing the program side exponentially. I'm recording this in July of 2021, and we're already double that, and we're adding new programs by the month. But when I was pitching this, I had to show both where we currently are and then where we're going to get to. And so, for example, we have some aspects of learn advanced growth skills to drive broad acquisition, effective activation, increase retention. We have some of those within some of our programs right now, but we don't really have any core programs focused exclusively for scale stage companies yet. On the early stage, when I pitched this, I was still building what I call the Finding Initial Customers set of modules, which ended up becoming a course that we run and is available on demand now. I was doing a little bit with experimentation, but there was nothing fully built out there yet. So the point is that we want to talk about with truth what we have, and then we can sprinkle in those aspirational bits to get the investor excited about the direction and where this is going to go, right? And so again, what is your solution? What does it provide right now? Where is it going to go? And then you really have to demonstrate your product value. Okay. So you can even move this up. So you could start with your product, or maybe your product could be starting in slide 2, or maybe you're doing some kind of live demo, but you have to show your product in action. You have to quantify all this stuff you're talking about back to the investor in the form of demonstrated value to a set of customers in a potentially large market with a real solution. So show us your product. So if it's a real product, walk us through it. If it's a service, explain what it is with visuals. And my guidance would be keep this short and highly engaging. This is why I put this slide together. We have live cohort programs. So I talk about my solution. See, because we run courses and programs, right? It's not a pure product like some of you have. And so it's not a hard product. It's not a physical product. It's not a digital product. It's a productized service in a lot of ways. We record content and then we make it available, or we run live cohort programs where people show up live. It's all virtual right now, but there probably will be some in-person component to it. And we leverage that through weekly subject matter deep dives. We pull folks in for events and micro webinars and thought leadership and all that good stuff. None of that is like a hard product. So what I'm trying to do here is back up what we do with some real screenshots and examples of some of the stuff that we teach. So this is a metrics dashboard. So if an investor said, hey, like, what can you tell me or show me about your product? I'll say, well, actually, with my Mastering Growth program, we start out by building a growth model, and then we end up with a growth dashboard that kind of looks something like this, where you and your team every week are looking back on the metrics that you've decided, because you've been through the program, you've decided that these metrics really matter and they resonate with you, and they're a big component of growth for your business. So I can easily walk through that and show this spreadsheet. We talk about the cost intent matrix. I mean, I can go into detail on any and all of these. And in fact, I also put together a presentation here, which is me walking through the metrics that matter in the process, using a real example out there in the wild. So this is a recording of me giving one of my lectures, right? But it demonstrates how I provide value through the product. The other thing that is related to our product here is, again, because we're not a hard product, we're a set of courses and programs and webinars and workshops. I thought that I needed to kind of prove it out a little bit more that, hey, this operates like a product. So the sample program calendar, again, by stage, right? So you see that theme creeping in about stage again. I can talk about early stage, growth stage, scale stage, right? And the way that I walk through this slide, and the reason why I put this slide here is because I want to show that this is not a one and done membership model. So you don't just come in, you're not just going to come in as a company and take one course. You're going to graduate through these other courses and programs, and you're going to stick around for the community. And the feedback that I got from our investors was, wow. And I didn't know this in advance, right? Because I was, especially early on pitching this, I didn't have any feedback yet. So as I started getting feedback, the investors were saying things like, I'm seeing this with all of the investments in startups that I'm making, is that they don't really know where to go for leveling up and learning the skills that they need to grow their startup. And to me, that was gold, because that's how we modeled this. This slide here was to paint that picture that there is this linear progression again, but there's also a depth in offerings. And in a year, we'll have 40 options that founders and teams of marketers or product people within startups could kind of choose to consume content from. But right now we started with the batch that we have. And so I thought that we had to back into this a little bit more. So you may want to spend a little bit more time on your product if you're a service business, or if you're a productized service or a membership community, or you're not monetizing yet, or you don't have your product done. So spend as much time here as you need, and just make sure that you get that demonstration of value back in front of that investor. Next up, and I like to do this early, is social proof, because again, I am trying to convince investors that we're building a big business and we're not a hard product, but we do have some pretty darn good social proof. So social proof in a pitch simply adds a layer of trust. Testimonials, logos, an NPS score, any of those things could work for you. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you're going to use a quote, assume that the investor or whoever's going to, want to do a little bit of diligence on your company, they may want to talk to the person behind that quote. So don't put something up that somebody posted, sent you an email about and they're not comfortable talking about. Just assume that somebody's going to be reached out to if you're going to put them in your pitch deck. So what I'm doing here is I'm showing 3 examples of social proof trusted by founders at every stage. Again, there's that theme. You can see what I'm doing here, right? So I'm taking this stage-based theme and I'm applying it at almost every level of my walkthrough. Taskable, very, very early stage. Helium, a little bit larger, kind of in that growth stage. And Scout here, a little bit larger, kind of in that scale stage. And I tried to show an example based on real testimonials that I got from our members. And I did reach out and ask them to give feedback. And part of the feedback was that they gave these wonderful testimonials. You can't script this stuff, right? You just have to ask somebody, hey, can you share some thoughts about the program? And let them do the ideation around how to present that back. So I have probably 50 quotes and testimonials at this point that I could choose from, but I chose these 3 because it fits into those different stages. So again, if an investor said, hey, I saw that that one guy, what was his name? Oh, Matt from Taskable. Well, he's at the Launch Accelerator, but at the Launch Accelerator, aren't those really early stage companies? And I could say, hey, investor, that's a great question. Well, let me talk to you about how Bethany or how Drew or how the team at IDEO or from Rise Vision or from Poker Coaching, these are all companies that are at a much larger volume and they're at scale. Let me walk you through what some of them have to say and some of the value that they've brought to the table. So what I'm trying to do is build that credibility and trust again with that linear process that I've been working through. And I can honestly say that we're trusted by founders at every stage. Next up, even in a crazy hot market, it's almost impossible to raise money unless you've got a really strong and compelling revenue model and growth model that you can clearly articulate. You're probably going to need to show projections that you walk people through, and you're going to want to use and own your numbers. And I'm going to do another session on financials and prepping for second and third meetings with investors where they will have you walk them through a spreadsheet. And we have all of those models and stuff in the Growth University program. But I'll spin that off and that'll be an add-on module to this at some point in the near future. But you really have to own your numbers. Now, when I was thinking about this, we don't know if our current revenue model will be the revenue model that we stick with forever because it's too early to tell. But what we do have is some data that we could build a projection and a model off of. So we had growth in as early as November of 2020. So November, December, January, February. I started in January and I projected all of 2021. Our current offering as of March 2021 was that companies paid $1,500 per seat for annual access to the programs. We did quickly introduce a $149 a month option for a month-to-month subscription. And that's gone really, really well for us. So, but I wanted to walk you through the reason why I did mention that in the deck, and I probably didn't mention that in the original walkthrough now that I think about it. But the point is that you're projecting something here. And the reason why I introduced SaaS product in 2022, that's going to provide additional subscription revenues. One of the things that I showed earlier was a spreadsheet. One of the things I talk about in my programs are how to build these growth models. And one of the things investors want to see is that, hey, we love that this is a productized service. We love the margins that you have, but there is still that human component. A human still needs to record the course and put the course out there. And one of the things that we found is that a lot of the stuff that we're teaching in spreadsheets, we can actually productize. And so I do with conviction believe we will build that product out, but I don't think we're really going to start that until late 2021 and probably won't see revenue on that until 2022. So some of the stuff that you're seeing in our programs, if you're taking some of our other stuff, some of those models will be both available as spreadsheets, but they'll also be available in a new product that we're going to start working on and rolling out. So I built that narrative in here and set that expectation, which by the way, also means that every time I run an investor update, I have to speak to where we're at with that product vision. And so if you're going to pitch this and you're going to raise money off of a pitch, you have to be willing to kind of own that idea for a while, unless you decide to kill the idea, and then you have to communicate why you're killing that idea. Your monthly recurring revenue or your transactional revenue, whatever your membership or your subscription or your one-off or transactional or hourly rate, whatever that is, you want to project the next year minimum and show that in a graph like this. Everybody wants to see this going up and to the right, and they want you to explain how you're going to get there. Okay. We're going to revisit that theme in a second when we talk about traction. But the next component of your deck is around market size and opportunity. Now, market size and opportunity are absolutely foundationally critical to investors, because what they're looking to do is put in X number of dollars and get 10 to 100X that back, right? This is not a, we want 10% growth every year investment. Unless you're maybe working with friends and family, your angel investors and your VCs want an outsized return, because they know that most startups that they invest in fail and they lose money on all of those deals. It's the unicorn. It's the company that gets acquired for $100 million. It's the company that IPOs. Those are 1 in 10, 1 in 50, maybe 1 in 100 investments that these investors make all of their money on, right? So you have to convince them that they're getting an outsized potential for a return on their investment. And if you can't clearly do that, then you will not raise money. You might be able to convince some friends and family to invest in the small market opportunity, right? But your bigger investors, they will run from a pitch that shows no market or too small of a market or a dying market. So you have to clearly show your total addressable market, your service addressable market, and your service obtainable market. And you have to build this model off of some real market data. Let me show you how I did this. So market size and opportunity. So the 5.4 billion total addressable market was based on a $5.4 billion marketing and growth spend, mostly in paid acquisition, but also I did include SEO research, and I pulled these metrics from a few different places, but this is roughly what the US tech companies annually spend. And remember, there's 1.3 million tech companies that are started each year. So that's how I bake into that model. Your service addressable market is based on the spend that startups that make it to product market fit stage have. And so the way that I modeled this was I said that let's assume that 75% of startups never make it to product market fit. Only 25% do. The actual math is a lot less than that. But let's assume that the companies that we're working with, because they're learning and they're doing better, have maybe a slightly unfair advantage of doing better than their peers, right? That's part of our value prop, is we think that we can help companies grow. That's why we started this company. And so we believe that if we can get a 25% market to be viable to that product market fit zone, then we got a roughly $2 billion service addressable market. And then if we think that 10% of companies that are started make it to some level of scale. So 1 in 10 companies, they don't die in the first 5 years. They continue to grow, and some of them get really big. How much do they spend each year in terms of like marketing and growth and some of the things that they're going to focus on when they're trying to grow their businesses? And so we had put that to 812 million. Now, there's a spreadsheet that backs into this data. Now, if I were going to talk to an investor one-on-one, probably in a second or third meeting, and they're starting to poke holes in my total addressable market, which frankly is probably the weakest part of my walkthrough. And I realized that, so I didn't spend a lot of time on this when I was pitching, and I was hoping to not get a lot of questions on it. And I really didn't get a lot of questions, but I had a playbook ready to go in case I did start to get questions. So basically you want to probably in Excel or in Google Sheets, map out what the TAM, SAM, and service objectable market is based on some real data that you're finding. Gartner, and there's all sorts of places where you can go to find this data. Reach out to me if you want some help with it. But you need a slide like this that shows how big the market is, because nobody wants to invest in a market that is doing $50 million a year, right? There's no outsized return potential there. Okay, moving on. Traction and path to success. I will say that nothing beats traction. I've seen companies that are growing unbelievably quickly with great traction have a fairly rough rest of their deck, but when they get to their traction story, that alone plus their market convinces investors that it's worth their time. Show your main metrics and show how they're performing for at least a 3-month window leading up to the presentation date. Choosing what metrics to show is important, but showing growth on those metrics is absolutely fundamentally critical. Let me show you how we did this. Now, remember, I was pitching in March, so I didn't have data for March yet. But what I did have was a little tiny bit of a signal on what our monthly recurring revenue was in the earliest days, going back to November. That grew into December, that grew into January, and then it kind of exploded in February. So on the left-hand side is the MRR. On the right-hand side are the total number of active subscribers that basically make up that recurring revenue. Now, when an investor sees that you've got 188% average month-over-month growth, they're probably going to say there's no way they're going to keep that going. So I just come out of the gates and I say, we've had 188% average month-over-month growth. But 3 slides ago, when I showed you our revenue projection, it was based on 20% month-over-month growth. So the story you want to tell here is one based off of real traction, and you want to roughly map that traction back to the model that you shared earlier so that it looks like you know what you're talking about, right? What you don't want to have is this crazy revenue projection that you pitch. And then when you get to traction, like you're up and down every month, or like it's down and to the right, and it's, turns out things aren't going well. No, like what you need to show is 2 to 3 months of consistent growth and to be able to tell that traction story. So here's how I explain it. We sell based on number of seats. It's a subscription. They pay in advance for the year or they pay monthly. And while we started really small, we introduced the concept of subscriptions in November. We grew that a tiny bit in December. We basically doubled that in January. We saw a lot of new growth in January. And then in February, when we added a couple new programs and we started to spend money on paid acquisition, and I had hired a small team at that point. It wasn't just me working on this, or me and my co-founder, or my head of operations who's kind of been with it since the start. We had an actual team, and you can see the impact of that team coming in February. And so you want to tell that story of traction. Now, you don't have to have revenue metrics as your traction metrics. It could be user growth. It could be signups. It could be, if you're a media company, it'll be list growth. It might be, if you're a marketplace, GMV growth. But you have to choose some metrics that you're going to report on every month and with every investor update, and base your traction off of demonstrated growth for at least 2 to 3 months based on those metrics. Okay. If you've had really chunky revenue, I would urge you to take your time and figure out some of the customer acquisition and that early initial customer adoption over the next 2 to 3 months, and just try to incrementally grow those core metrics. And if you can't, then you maybe need to go back to the drawing board and figure out, well, is there a proxy metric or another metric that I can use that looks a little bit better, that we can tell a compelling growth story from, that does have a material impact on the business growth. We then talk about this road to 100 million. Again, most investors want to see that outsized return. So when I was running my model, I had to figure out, okay, well, if 100 million is kind of the big company that equals the outside return, how the heck do I get there and how long does it take me? And based on our $1,500 per seat model, I believe that if we go after larger companies, we're starting to see this now, where we're starting to sell bulk volume-based seats. So that a lot of those growth and those scale stage companies they'll buy 4 or 6, 3, 4, 6 seats, and we could sell more than that if relevant. So if we can get 4 companies, 4 seats on average per company, we're at $6,000 annual spend. and then you back into the 10 million and the 100 million from there, and you basically tell your story. The other thing is that I threw this chart in here. What country are you joining us from? And what is your city? I threw this in because it showed strong international growth already. If this was just USA only, I would not have shown this because I can't tell an international growth story, but I can already tell an international growth story. And in fact, this is held consistent. We have a huge amount of our companies coming from outside of the US right now. And I think that's a huge competitive advantage as we scale up our own business and go to market with more programs, because we're already in Europe, in Asia, we're in the Middle East, right? We're in South America. We're everywhere already. We have companies in our member community and that are subscribers that are literally from all over the world. So I figured let's promote that because that's a value add to the model here. So most early stage funding is team first and traction second. What I mean by that is if you're raising a small round or an angel round and you have great traction, that's amazing. But if you don't have great traction yet, or your product is still very early, a lot of investors early on are willing to bet on you, the founder, and or your team. So what about you, your team, or your product gives you an unfair advantage in your market or in your space? Toot your horn, tout your team, and show us why you're amazing. Let me show you how I do this. First of all, I put Jason right in the middle. So Jason is a co-founder of Growth University. He's not super involved operationally day to day, but he's a big face of the brand, and he's a huge driver of one of the main pillars of how we grow, which is through a partnership strategy. So we work with the Launch Accelerator and the Syndicate, and there's a huge ecosystem that he has built that we can tap into. So he's front and center. His 200 plus investments and being one of the first investors in Calm and Uber and Robinhood and Thumbtack, that speaks for itself. So if anybody is in the startup space who's heard of Jason, there's some credibility right there that's already baked in. I put myself here. I'm the founder, CEO, former growth and product at Sandbox, Upside Travel, Red Tricycle, Votion, New Signature, eDialogue. I talk about how I'm a 6-time founder. There's some failures in there. I'm a growth advisor, and I've had 4 exits, and not all of them huge, right? But the point is that you put the information out there that is most relevant, that builds that trust and credibility. I've got 10 plus years of curriculum building. I've done this for a very long time, and I think I bring a lot of credibility to the table. Jen is my co-founder on marketing, growth, and training. She has done, as you see here, over 200 course audits. She's a QQI certified trainer, trained the trainers, has a master's in digital marketing strategy. And I also worked with her before when this was not yet a company. And she was one of the strongest performance marketers that I had ever been exposed to working with. She's also a 2-time founder and has over 8 years of working on this stuff. So we really have an incredibly strong team. And we did already in March when we were pitching this. And I also can showcase some of our advisors in the supporting team. So Shane on partnerships, who I worked with for a long time at Sandbox, Fabian, who is a author on brand and brand strategy. And so we pull them in, and they're also available as help within this ecosystem. And then we've got program mentors. So all sorts of people have gotten involved who want to help us out along our journey. So I really kind of promote that. I talk about it. I feel really confident about it. And I think it's an amazing team. And so showcase that, figure out what about your team makes you awesome. Go for the ask. So you have to ask for what you want. Don't be vague with this. Investors want to know what you need and why. Show how much you need, at what valuation, what your cap, and how are you going to use those funds broadly. You have to ask for what you want. Let me show you. I'm raising $500,000 to scale up. Well, guess what? By the time we had pitched in March, we had already a lot of this committed. So I felt really confident coming in that we were going to close up this round. And in fact, we were oversubscribed, and we increased the size of our round because of that. Raising $500K on a $5 million pre-money cap. So the investor can understand dilution. They understand if they put in $50,000, how much they're going to get in equity. 18 months of runway that shows them that, hey, we're not going to just burn the cash in 6 months and be gone. And then use of funds that we're scaling team programs, product development, right? So I've already talked about all those things, but that is the ask. I'm clear about it. It's a low enough valuation that I thought at the time the investors would be super interested in it. We probably could have gone higher on the valuation and gotten ourselves diluted a little bit less, but I wanted to raise money quickly. And I think between the pitch and the connections and the way we did this and the valuation, frankly, is one of the reasons why we closed this relatively quickly. Nobody questioned us about our valuation. And then nobody questions us about the use of funds. And then the last thing you want to do is focus on the close. So thank people for being there. You want to show how to get in touch. Mostly what you want to do is open the door for more engagement and questions. So I just say, drop anything else that's critical into your appendix. Have more data ready to go, have more slides ready to go. So here's my example. I thought that I was going to get a lot of questions on how this whole ecosystem worked. Turns out I didn't get a lot of questions on this, but I had built this whole playbook for growth. So like we have live cohort programs and then actionable insights where founders are putting the stuff they're learning to work. And then there's personalization and community. We've got these mentors and we're helping guide founders around that path to scale, right? So I built this out and I never really had to use it. I anticipated a bunch of questions on customer acquisition, which we also didn't really get, but there's 4 channels that drive awareness. We run these programs and we run events that drive activation. And then we have retention because we've got more depth in terms of the programs that you can do. And then that leads to happy customers, which leads to word of mouth and referrals. Again, I didn't really get asked any of this, but I had slides like this and there were more that were available and other data that was available in the appendix in case I needed to do a deeper dive and show anything to an investor that might have had a question. Competitive landscape comes up pretty frequently. And I like to say here, like what worked in the past won't stay fresh for long. So college and MBA programs, they just can't keep up with the rate of change that's happening in the market and people being virtual and just learning as they go. And career accelerators focus on individual career growth and not on the needs of the startup. And we actually focus on the needs of the startup first and then on the individual second. And we help startups build that in-house IP around growth that they can put into action immediately. So I put this slide together, again, based on where I thought we clearly differentiated ourselves, which was on founder and startup focused, cohorts, live cohort and community, and more of a focus on that than just kind of the asynchronous individual learning, and more focused on the holistic growth of a startup and the founder versus just like individual career advancement of the individual within an organization that it seems like everybody else is focused on. We think that the individual will gain a ton of value as the buyer, but it'll be within the context of whatever startup they're working within. So hopefully that was helpful. That is my walkthrough. Again, there's going to be some additional modules added here as I go and build out the rest of this program, but I hope you enjoyed this. Please reach out to me with any questions you might have, and I'd be happy to take a look at your deck anytime you would like. Thanks.